Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
And joining us is our pal Ben Standig of The Athletic. We're going to go around all of the top stories. Ben, pro days we got going. We got how this D.C. news yesterday affects the Commanders. So first of all, pleasantries. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, man. Glad to be back with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into specifically how this news affects the Commanders, like you're a DC sports fan, someone who's covered all these teams in town for a long time and grew up here and like has thoughts beyond just being a reporter. What's your reaction to the news that the Monumental teams are staying in DC?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I definitely was on the side that felt that while understanding the Cap One could use some sprucing up, that it just made a lot of sense for fans and certainly for the city to keep those teams there. A brand new building would certainly be fun, but just from the start, this whole thing just didn't seem like it was a well constructed idea. So I think it's a good thing overall that it worked out the way that it did. I wish, whatever. I mean, I just think it's a good thing for DC. I do think it brings an interesting view, though, of what happens next with the Commanders. But just in terms of that, I just think being, arenas and stadiums in the city, just, the vibe, and it just works so much better than being out in the burbs. And not that the Alexander thing was like the burbs per se, but just, city limits or something to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what does this mean for the Commanders as much as you can tell in their pursuit of RFK?
Well, look, obviously there's, one hurdle has been eliminated with Congress, agreeing to, turn over the rights to the RFK site to the city, and we'll presume that the Senate will do the same, and the president signs off on it, and then it gets to D.C., to the D.C. government. I obviously RFK has the nostalgic in its favor that people wanted to be there, and possibly even Josh Harris, who obviously grew up here, and that would be a huge deal. It was a huge point for DC to, if all these things go into place. The problem is, the way I see it, going back a ways ago, there seemed to be some objections on the DC Council to, spending the kind of money needed to bring in a new stadium, everything that it would cost to spend. And that was before they just agreed to put in $515 million over 3 years into the Capital One site. I just wondered, is there really, look, you come up with money all over the place, but come up with different taxes and other ways to create the money, but I really wonder now if they're going to have the money / the stomach on some level to get this done. I kind of think that I've had Maryland as the favorite from the start, home field advantage, as it were. That Maryland is already, trying to create a Navy Yard type feel for in that space around FedEx Field. They obviously own the land, they have the land, all that. To me, feel like this may even put Maryland, at least for me, even more as the favorite, because of, I just don't know where DC is going to be at with spending even more money. And when we spoke with Josh Harris at the owners meeting on Tuesday, I asked him, hey, you're obviously paying attention to Monumental here. What do you think? And he said, needless to say, they're tracking it, that it could affect them. He also said in another answer that while they're waiting to see what happens at RFK, they're already having, deep discussions with Maryland, because they can't, they don't know what's going to happen. They got to move forward with their own situation one way or the other without knowing whether DC or Virginia is going to get the Monumental team. So I just think yesterday was probably a good day for Maryland, unless, I guess there's a world where this is just a done deal. They wanted to go to RFK, and we'll do whatever it takes to get it there. But I really do kind of wonder if DC is going to, again, have the money and have the stomach to want to go see this all the way through at this point.
So the money part to me is the most interesting because to me that's where just I'm talking, the way my brain is working here. I haven't done any reporting on this. You have, so if I'm wrong, like by all means, tell me. But to me, it's they want to be in DC, no doubt. That much I do know. That much I have done the reporting on. The team would like to be in DC if they could make the rest of it work. And they have the money in that ownership group if they want to make the rest of it work, even though DC probably is not in a position now to give them as much money as they were 3 days ago before they pledged this money to Ted and Monumental. So I guess the question I have here, Ben, is like, what is the stomach for Josh Harris and his partners to do the majority, if not all, the funding here, if it means they would be able to be the people that returned the Commanders to RFK?
Yeah, I think to me that's kind of the wild card here. Obviously the financial wherewithal that Harris and his partners have, and whether it's their own or to access money, I'm sure they can get it done if they want to. But yeah, they just spent $6 billion to buy the team. So I don't know how much more they want to put in for this. Whereas we don't know the final numbers for any of these jurisdictions, what they would be willing to put in. But for Maryland, obviously they would like to keep the team. They've already shown a willingness to invest in the pro teams in town, including the Ravens and the Orioles up in Baltimore. I mean, in state, I should say. So like they're clearly willing to do it, and they've been pretty open and aggressive in saying, hey, we want to get this done. I just don't know that Harris, if Harris wanted to be at RFK that much. Yeah, I think that's a huge question: is how much money are they really willing to put into this? It would be a massive feather in his cap to be the guy who brought the team back to the city, but at the same time, money talks, and I don't know how much they're going to do. And you factor in what Harris has so many other projects going, including trying to build a new 76ers stadium or arena in downtown Philadelphia. So he's got that project going on as well. These things may all be very separate and different pools of money, but it's all connected to him and his various partners. So I don't know. Like I said, I think to me, the Maryland situation seems like it's got a lot more going for it in that regard, but DC, perhaps they can surprise us. I'll just to sort of tie this back into the Wizards and Caps situation, though. Like I remember way back when, even back when Dan Snyder was still owning the team, it felt to me like the DC may be like taking their eye off the ball. Well, I guess maybe not so much with Snyder because they weren't really interested then. But once Harris got involved, it felt like they maybe were taking their eye off the ball a little bit because we knew that Leontis wanted more, wanted money for that for that arena, and they were really focused clearly on the Commanders, which I think we all understand. I imagine, this is just my guess, but that they were hoping to lock in the Commanders for RFK and then come back to Leontis, and instead, obviously, it's gone the other way. And now, that they've put that money up front, I think that's, I don't know how much more they're going to be willing to do. So yeah, I think, like you said, is how much is Harris really willing to invest? It's a great question, but I think Maryland, like I said, it continues to make more sense to me.
Yeah, the other thing, and I'm spitballing here, is I wonder how much more the team is worth if it's got RFK. Like if you're Josh Harris and you get a plus $500 million on your net worth if your stadium is at RFK versus Landover. Well, that's, I don't want to say like $500 million in free money. That math doesn't exactly math that way. But like how much, you use the word invest there. And I really wonder, like, and again, I'm spitballing. I have no idea what these answers are. And so maybe someone with an economics degree is listening to this going, Craig, you sound like the biggest idiot that has ever spoken into a microphone. And I'd be like, well, that's not the first time, economics man. But point being, like, if you've got more value being in place A than place B, how much more willing are you to take that on the front end, even if place B is willing to give you more money? And considering we don't know any of the numbers right now, I don't know if you have any more insight or anything you'd like to add to that calculation, but that is a thought that I have with this on top of the feel goods and the tradition and all of that.
Yeah, no. And yeah, I don't know the numbers. Another part here to consider is, at some point here in this process, they're going to build a new practice facility as well. There's some notion, hey, could you do it all in one space? I don't know if the RFK site would be big enough to do all that, even if they wanted to. But when we asked Harris the other day about this, he said he didn't feel that necessarily the practice facility in the stadium needed to go in the same place. I think keeping it in Virginia, there's some financial incentives to doing that. And, if you do separate them, you could create a bit of a mini city at the practice facility, similar to what the Cowboys have done at their place. So there's a lot of different ways to go to sort of, build up the overall investment, to generate more revenue, to increase value beyond just the stadium, even if that's obviously the main attraction. So yeah, I don't know what RFK would mean for the value of everything versus staying in Landover. Clearly, there's more cachet. Roger Goodell, NFL commissioner, was asked about this the other day, and he clearly sounded like a guy who would like to have for the league to have a stadium in the nation's capital and for everything it could do, possibly including a Super Bowl. But you got to have a partner to do it. And again, not to keep repeating myself, but we'll see if DC is going to be willing to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Ben Standig of The Athletic with us. I'll just say this to wrap us up on this, and then we'll get to some football with these pro days happening. But they will keep something in Virginia. You mentioned the financial incentives. It might be a business office where like 28 marketing people work. But if you have something that can be written up in law as a headquarters in Virginia, they keep their casino license and their sports betting stuff. So that's a big financial incentive for them to have something in the Commonwealth. But I know there's a lot of pull to potentially pull the practice facility to Maryland, Sutherland, and Ashburn. So as Ben said, we'll see. The big other story in terms of the football team part of the operation right now is, of course, pro days happening. They were at LSU's yesterday. They're at UNC's today watching Drake Maye do his thing. What are you hearing about how these days are going and the Commanders' oversized presence in them as the team with the highest pick between Knicks, Chicago, knowing they're going with Caleb Williams?
Yeah, obviously we get to watch the throwing part on TV. So it's fun to see these guys on cork passes down the field, and they're interacting with their teammates. And I don't really think for the most part the performance parts matter. I mean, unless somebody is just a train wreck, it's really probably more about getting a chance to talk to the player more. They met with these guys at the combine. This is the next part of that. Watch how they interact with their teammates. If they do have a bad throw, what's their demeanor, things along those lines. And as we've all been discussing, this team has been keeping everything pretty close to the vest in terms of what they're thinking and so on. The Drake Maye, Jayden Daniels, J.J. McCarthy aspect is really, continues to be fascinating. There are a lot of people who have, very strong pro and cons opinions in all directions. We heard a lot of J.J. McCarthy talk, obviously, over the few days. Is it a coincidence that his pro day was towards the end of last week, leading into the owners' meeting? Perhaps, perhaps not. Recency bias, what have you. And now these guys are, Daniels and May go on back-to-back days. I didn't get much sense that anybody did anything particularly negative to hurt them in any direction. So, I think this is just all more pieces of the puzzle. I don't think these are anything that's declarative. I think these pro days are probably better off for the guys who were not paying attention to the mid-round undrafted free agent types who get to show off some of what they can do to these scouts. But it's part of the circus that happens every year with the draft. And again, I don't get the sense that anybody had any terrible marks, but I would be surprised if anybody changed minds too much based on anything they did on the field.
So the comments this time of year are always hilarious because people want us to say nothing and just fast forward to the draft. And I'm like, that actually, believe it or not, sounds amazing. But I do have to do this job every day. I do have to talk about something every day. And so we take the time to have a little fun and explore the different possibilities of what about this trade? What about this player? What are the pros? What are the cons? And we beat these topics to death because that's what happens this time of year because we can't bend time and space. But as someone who covers this day in, day out and has whatever journalistic responsibility you feel to yourself and your employer, Ben, what actually are you paying attention to this time of year as we pass the time between the end of the college and NFL seasons and the draft? Like, what to you actually matters? Like, who could say something that you'd be like, oh, I actually care about that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's important to get as well. Okay, I just came up with this analogy off the top of my head, and this is a weird one, so bear with me. Did you watch?
Let's
did
go.
You read
Here
the
we
Harry
go.
Potter? Did you read the Harry Potter books or watch the movies or any of those things?
Yeah, I read the books and have seen the movies. I think between the books and the movies, I've seen it all. So yes.
So they play this game of Quidditch, right? And like the whole point is, if you catch this golden snitch thing that's flying around, you win the game. Except that while that's happening, they're also playing a separate game where like there's this bigger ball that they're all chasing around and they're whacking each other with it, trying to get it. And I've never understood what was the point of that. Is it so in case nobody ever catches the other ball? Because once you get the other ball, the other game is completely irrelevant. So my point is that talking to as many scouts as possible, talking to as many people around the league as possible to get their views, because I got to get some opinion here. If the Commanders aren't talking, then that's all interesting and it's good. It's good intel, but it doesn't matter ultimately, because all that matters ultimately is what does Adam Peters think. 28 people could tell me they think Jayden Daniels is great, but if Adam Peters is a Drake Maye guy, then none of it matters. So obviously you try to do as much homework as you can and try to get a feel for what's real, what's not, and you do hear some things sometimes you're like, I don't know, that doesn't make a ton of sense. Or sometimes you're like, boy, okay, I get that. This source has been a pretty straight shooter in the past. But, again, at the end of the day, it's, Adam Peters casing the golden snitch. That's really, or the organization, whether it's at Peters or Dan Quinn or Kingsbury, whoever's ultimately going to be the one that sort of, pushes it in a certain direction. That's what matters. And, to their credit and to the detriment of those of us who want to speculate, it's been pretty quiet, as we know. So I don't know if that analogy works, but, that's, it's all interesting, and you're really, you're all curious. But again, you can talk to people about these guys, and some of them are really positive, some of them are negative, and it's interesting. But ultimately, I don't know if any of it matters until we hear what Adam Peters wants to do.
I think that's a wonderful analogy. Now I really want to someone's going to have to call into the show or leave a comment on the YouTube stream or whatever on what the hell the other part of Quidditch is, because you're right. Whoever gets the snitch, you win. But was the snitch maybe worth a certain number of points, and could you have an insurmountable lead? I don't know. We'll figure that out another day. We don't, I think, need to spend extra time on it. But what I do think, like the chasing of the other score, it becomes interesting is after the pick 3 years from now. If all of a sudden you go back and it's like, well, everyone said they should have taken player B and they took player A, chances are that the GM that made the against the grain decision might be out of a job, or the coach that pushed that might be out of a job. So I don't want to say it matters none, but for the piece of information that we all want to know, which is who's the quarterback that we're going to be watching the next 3 to 5 to hopefully 10 years, I think you're 100% right that it really only matters what happens, 4 weeks from now in Detroit? Yeah,
ultimately. And, I think also, what is happening now is, as we certainly we've heard a lot of rumors about what, speculation, what might happen. These guys are just not even, what they're saying, and I think it makes sense. They're just not done yet. There is a month to go before the draft. Why would you, let's just even say you had a strong inkling. Why would you say, yeah, we're good now? You still have plenty of time to sort through, to talk to more people, to, contemplate other scenarios, to, is a trade down a possibility? I would think you'd want to consider that for a variety of reasons. There's no point in declaring anything. And the fact that they are being, as quiet, as cautious as they are, sort of makes it, makes it even, even harder for us. I think the one thing that is curious is that every year there's these, players that we're hearing are going to be picked pretty high, and it doesn't happen. Will Levis last year, Malik Willis before that. Is that what's going on here with J.J. McCarthy, or is it that, as often the case, the public is only catching up to where the league has been, and I started hearing about J.J. McCarthy being more impressive than people think, over a month ago. So that's the part that gets interesting. Will we at draft day be like, oh, okay, enough people were just snowing us that player X was going to be picked as high as they were, and then they weren't. That could happen. So I think that is probably maybe the part that is the most interesting about what we're hearing now. But that doesn't necessarily, again, have anything to do with Washington's view of these quarterbacks.
Yeah, I was about to actually ask you that, and we can keep it like the 10-second version of the answer because we're out of time here, and I've abused enough of your time. But like, if you had to guess, do you think, because beyond the Washington stuff, you're so plugged in around the league, do you think the McCarthy thing is real? Like, is this due to top 10 pick, or do you think people are just blowing smoke?
I've had too many people with seemingly no connection, unless they're all like playing a game. Okay, today here's the talking point. Yeah. J.J. McCarthy.
Full Standig. We got him.
Right. I mean, and obviously it's not just me, right? Pelossero's saying McCarthy. Other people are putting McCarthy high in their mock. So it just feels like there is something real, but it's we'll find out soon enough.
Matt Miller at ESPN had him top 10 in his first mock in January, and I was like, what? And then the more I've watched him, and Logan's had the same thing. Like, the more you watch him, you're just like, oh, I get it. I understand it. He's really good. So we will see. Ben Standig writing about it all at The Athletic. Great stuff as always, sir, on all fronts. Really appreciate your time, and have a great weekend.
Craig, glad to hear your voice. Glad Anthony is still over there. Hasn't gone off on the deep end. In his world, whatever that means. So we'll talk soon.
I'm not so sure that he hasn't, but we can cover that a different time. Thank you. That's yeah. All right, that's Ben Standig with us here on the Hoffman Show. Anthony, you all right over there? You doing good? You hanging in there?
How did I catch a stray?
I don't know. Ben maybe do it.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.